They weren't part of the followers of God back in those days. They weren't before God called Abraham, he was in a family that was in idolatry, that did not serve God, the true and one God, but they served gods. So right here, this is an amazing thing that has taken place right here. And right here is when it says, "Then I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river. I led him throughout all the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac." So right here, the Lord is saying, speaking through Joshua, when he called out Abraham. See, Abraham didn't have the background that a lot of us may have. Or some of us may have a similar background to what Abraham has. But the one thing that we have in common with Abraham is that we came out from different backgrounds. We came out from we have different histories. We have different things that had happened in the past. And at this time, we didn't know who we were. We try to find ourselves. We try to look in the streets. We try to look in the neighborhoods. We try to look at the parties. We try to look everywhere else that we could to find out who we were. There was an identity crisis because we tried everything before we came to God. We tried the drugs. We tried the alcohol. We tried the prescriptions. We tried everything. But we just could not find ourselves. And this is the reason why we kept going back again and again and again, because the reason why we kept going back is because we try to find peace within it. We try to find restoration within it. We try to find something that can fix us and make us complete within it. And that's why we became more reliant on all these things. But yet, we still remain broken. See, we didn't know who we were. People will tell us who we were, but it wasn't who we were made to be. So the Lord called Abraham out of this background. And I want to read this verse in Genesis 12, 1 through 7. If that's the baby, it's okay, but if it's one of you, that's different. And this is what happened right here in verse 12 of Genesis 1. It says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. In you all families of the earth shall be blessed. I will make you a great nation.'" See, when God called you out from where you were, God said that he was going to make something of you. See, God had purposed you to do something in your life. And God called you out for a reason. He didn't call you out just for a taste of him. He called you out because he has something great and mighty planned for your life. See, but it was beforehand. We were unable to identify who we were until God showed us who we were. It was at this time when God was calling out Abram to come out and to leave his family. And that he was going to make a nation out of him. That he was going to do a great and mighty work in his life. See, when God called us out from where we came from, God had spoken something specifically to us. God said that he was going to do something in our lives. How many of you has God promised you something? And God has brought something to pass. But we're touching the basis right here. It's going to get a lot deeper than this, but we're talking about right now, God has promised each and every one of us something. Whether we like to admit it or not, God promised us something. And he's talking to Abram right here, and those that come against you and curse you, I will curse them. See, we have to understand when we walk with God, we don't have to worry about what man is going to come and try to do to us. That's all in God's hands. We don't have to worry about what man will say about us, because again, that's all in God's hand. We have to understand that our lives are no longer our lives any longer, but God has everything under control. See, in verse 4, It goes on to say, see if I could find it here. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir to possess, but Jacob, his children, went down to Egypt. And if you know the history of these two siblings right here, rivalry started in the womb. It was funny how you read this. How many even know the history of them two? It is funny. I mean, it's comical how they were fighting in the womb. And when one was born out, the other one's holding the other one by the ankle. I mean, but they were always rivals. They always fought. But there was a time when they found peace. But throughout the whole time they fought. But we're not talking about this. But if you read about it, go through Genesis and you'll start reading this. And even through the Word, when you read it at times, it's kind of funny on how, from the womb, how we can be a certain way. And how we could have our behaviors, our characters. And like my baby, my grandbaby, she comes out, I'm holding her. I don't know if she's going to be a boxer or not, but when I hold her, she's always like swinging like this. I don't know where she learned that from. I don't know if she learned that from mom. I don't want to go any further into that one, but she learned that from somewhere, but she has boxing techniques going on. But it was from Abraham's decision to follow God that he was given the ability in his old age, and his wife was able to conceive the two, Jacob and Esau. And it says right here in verse 5, it says, also I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt. According to what I did among them afterward, I brought you out. Then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea. And the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. So they cried out loud to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, threw the sea upon them, brought the sea upon them, and covered them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. Then you dwelt in the wilderness a long time, and I brought you into the land of the Amorites, who dwelt on the other side of the Jordan, and they fought with you. But I gave them into your hand, that you might possess their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose to make war against Israel, and sent and called Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam, therefore he continued to bless you. So I delivered you out of his hand. Verse 11, then you went over the Jordan, and came into Jericho, and the men of Jericho fought against you, also the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Gershites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Try saying that 5 times fast. But I delivered them into your hand. I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you. Also the 2 kings of the Amorites, but with not your sword or with your bow. I had given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and the olive groves which you did not plant. So here's Joshua giving a history of what God had done in their lives in the past history up to that very point. God is reminding them of his faithfulness, giving just a brief, I'm talking about a small history of a lesson of the great things that he had done for Israel. And I'm saying this morning because it's very, very, very important that we remember what God has done in our lives. And I'm not talking about now. I'm not talking about a couple years ago. I'm talking about entirely. I'm talking about since the day that you gave your life to God up to this point. God has done something in your life that we cannot never forget. If we can count the things that we were grateful that God had done in our lives, there will be countless of things. Why is it so important to remember? Why is it so important to remember? I'll tell you how critical it is to remember this. If you forget your wedding anniversary and you have to answer to your wife, how's she going to react to you, man? Yeah, exactly. You're in trouble. If we cannot remember what God has done in our lives and be grateful for that, what's going to happen to us? We'll become ungrateful. we'll become thinking that God owes us something, that God owes us an explanation, that God owes me something because I have a right to it. I was promised this, so therefore I'm expecting this. I haven't seen it, so therefore I'm going to hold back and I'm going to have resentment now. See, God doesn't work that way. God only works through obedience and trust and having faith in Him. And it's so easy for us to forget history and what God has done for our lives. Of all the things that God has done for us. See, as we see God move in our lives, and as God continues to work in our lives, our work will never be done until our life is done. We could sit here at times and we could complain to God and we could be upset at God, but your life will not end until your life has been fulfilled. Your life won't end until it's been fulfilled. That means whenever God decides to call you back, because there's nothing in this life that can take you away, only if God allows it. Only if God allows it. And if you're sitting in church today and you're asking God, use me, and you're saying, Lord, I'll do anything, and Lord, I want to move mountains for you, your life will not pass away until you complete the tasks that God has put on you. If you're in church today and you're desiring, you want God, and you're telling God, I want this and I want that, and He has that purpose in your life, and you want to make heaven your home, it's best that you get on to the work that God's put ahead of you so that you can complete the work. And then when it's time, then God will call you back. When it's time, God will call you back. But until then, have you heard of that saying, there's no rest for the wicked? There's no rest for the wicked. I'm telling you what, if the wicked ain't resting, that means that we shouldn't be resting as well. If the wicked is determined to get their voice out there, to speak out, and to do it in violence, in their own flesh and their own ways, how much more as Christians and believers in God today can we speak against these things, but hold back the physical violence and let the Word of God and the power of God move in those circumstances? See, we don't have to do much, church. We just have to have faith. We just have to believe that God is still on the throne. We still have to remember the things that He did for us many years ago, that He's going to do for us exactly the things today. See, God's still in the move of doing miracles and moving in power. But we have to believe. We have to keep trusting in God. Have you ever been going through something in times, and it seems like that you're being dragged through the mud, and all of a sudden you remember something that God's done for you? Have you ever had that happen before to you? Do you think you just remembered that on your own? That's God trying to get a hold of you. That's God reminding you. There's those things that we try to block off, that God shows us, like, do you remember this time? And like, I don't want to remember this time, God. Well, do you remember this time? I don't want to remember this time either, God. Well, what do you want to remember? You just want to remember the bad times? See, God wants to remind us of the good times, the good things, the things that He's helped us through. See, God reminds us through these times when we're just sitting and all of a sudden, ding, we have a memory that pops up of something powerful that God did. Us today, us as believers, we are paving the way for our families. We're paving the way for our families. They will follow and they will pave the way for their families. See, we're doing something that's so critical for today. If we stop doing what God wants us to do today, will our next generation be lost? Because if we can't find the strength, if we can't muster up the faith, if we can't go and do what God's called us to do, Who else is paving the way for the next generation? If it's not us, then who is it? Who are we leaving it up to? Sometimes we get tired. Sometimes we get bound down by worries in life. We get tired and we get fed up. We go through so many changes. We go through, and I get it. I get it. We experience that. We experience the frustrations. We experience the shortcomings. We have things that we fail at. Not everything goes according to how we want it to go. It doesn't happen that way all the time. My life, the way that I planned it, isn't going according to the way that I planned it. In some parts, God has given me the desires of my heart. He has given me the desires of my heart. But has it gone according to my plan? It hasn't. But I can't lose heart. Have I been through? Yeah, I believe we all have been through something. Even recently, up to the past years. But who's paving the way for the family that's around you? Who's inspiring them to do whatever it is that they're inspiring them to do? What are they speaking into your kids' lives, into your cousins' lives, into your family members' lives? Because I tell you what, when we let go of the reins, someone else is taking over. Someone else is winning them over to whatever it is that they're trying to win them over to. The time that we stop from filling them up is the time that they start going on empty and someone else comes in and just starts filling them up with something else. See, we don't have time to stand back. We don't have time to stand back. We don't have time to allow our sicknesses, our doubts, our fears to interrupt your God-given purpose. We don't have time for that. Tomorrow changes, and the next day changes, and the next day changes. They're talking about COVID already. They're talking about COVID already. This is allergies right here. I've been dealing with allergies ever since Tuesday. That's why I'm just kind of like drinking a lot of water more than normal. See, this is my third sip already. Yeah, see, it's not a miracle. It's because my allergies are acting up. Oh, the Lord's going like this. We got to wake up, church. We have to wake up. Now I'm talking about spiritually. There's going to be a time that we're going to be challenged. And I'm not just talking about this ministry. I'm talking about individually. I'm talking about in your marriage. I'm talking about in your family. The devil's trying to come in and he's trying to destroy marriages. I'm telling you that right now. You can say that you have the perfect marriage, but I'm telling you, God is going to have his way in the marriages if we allow him to. But the one time that we let go and we start letting off the pedal, the enemy is going to come right in. And he's going to begin to mess with your marriage. Why would he mess with your marriage? Why would he mess with your marriage? Because there's a division that takes place. He said, she said. And when it becomes like that, then there's no unity. There's no agreement. There's no bond that's there. And the only way to get that bond in that marriage is through God. Because remember, God had ordained marriage to be sacred. Unity between husband and wife. And I know that this is an uncomfortable talk at some times. But if we can't start in the church, we can't start out there evangelizing, we can't start doing all these things if we can't get it right in our homes. That's the hardest thing, that's the hardest pill that I had to swallow, and I still have to swallow today. You can't go out there and you can't start loving everyone else if you can't love the people at your own home. Once you're able to do that, then you're able to love others. Once you're able to do that, then you're able to show that and give that to everyone else. That'll be always the most challenging thing that you always have to face. Because there's that one saying that, what's that saying? I know the guys will know this one. God knows no wrath of a woman or something like that. How does it go?
There's no wrath like the wrath of a woman's scorn.
Yeah, there you go. There's no wrath like a woman's wrath.
There's no wrath like the wrath of a woman's scorn.
See? Don't burn your ladies. Don't burn them. Ladies, don't burn your husbands either, because I know you tried that before too. Take care of each other. As we take care of each other in the church. Is it easy to, I'm stuck on this, I'm sorry. Is it easy to always love your wife? No, it's not. Is it always easy to see what she needs? No, it's not. Is it always easy to read her heart? Heck, no, it's not. But God gives the ability to do so. God gives the ability to do so. And if we're not seeking God for our wives, then that means we're just trying from our own understanding. And that works for only so long until something happens. Because we try out of our own reasonable service for our wives and our spouses, that when it begins to seem like we're giving out too much, we begin to get upset and say, well, I'm doing everything that I can to make you happy. That's because we're doing it out of self-service. We're doing it out of our own understanding. But see, when we go to God, God enables us to see the woman's heart and helps us to understand what she needs. And most of the time, what she needs is a listening ear. A listening ear goes a long way. And not just a listening ear to where you're just like, and you have that blank stare into her eyes and you're just like, And she says, well, are you going to say something back? And you're like, yeah. What was that last thing you said? It was interesting. Going back to Joshua, if we're not paving the way for our families, everyone else will suffer. Everyone else will suffer. If you're not trying to implant the Word of God into your family's lives, somewhere along the line, they're going to find out the hard way. Sometimes it's not easy having those conversations with your sons and your daughters because you don't know how to talk to them, because they don't really ask you questions, or they're really not open, or whatever the case may be. But sometimes we don't say things because we don't know how the reaction will be. Will they talk to me any longer? Will they want to come over anymore? See, for me, when my kids come over to their house, when Mariah and Sanchez come over to their house, I tell them how. If I have something to say, I say it because I have no filter with them. Especially my son-in-law. He's stuck. He can't go nowhere. So if you don't like it, he could go home. Allergies, sorry. But having those tough conversations, it will save them at the end. It will save them at the end. Before he asked for my daughter's hand in marriage, we had a conversation. We had a conversation. Any conversation that a father will have with the boy that's trying to come in and take the daughter away. It was one of those conversations, and he knows exactly what that was about. It wasn't tough for me, but it was tough and it was humbling for him because he had to accept it. He had to accept the repercussions if something was to take place. The side effects, physically what would take place if something was to happen. There was no threatening, but it was just pure that, hey, I'm just saying, I don't care if I'm 70 years old, if something, I'm still going to be there. And those kids, same thing. They come tell me something, guess what? Pop's on the way. Because we got to understand we're raising the next generation. And I'm not saying this about him. But if someone don't know how to love and respect somebody, then they got to be taught that. They got to be instructed in that. In whatever way imaginable without physical contact. Because sometimes we have to have those conversations. We have to come down to earth and get off our spiritual high chair and have normal conversations and be sincere about it, and yet sometimes blunt. Hey, I need this to be done. Well, I'll try it. Well, either you can or you can't. If you're going to try, then I need an answer. I could go ask somebody else. And it's getting to that place in our lives where we're asking God, well, what can I do? And God's already been putting it on your hearts. Well, you can do this and you can do that. Don't wait for God to give you a little push. God's answer is final. When God says and tells you, yes, go ahead and do it, that means He has your back 110% all the way. You don't have to wait to feel anointed. You don't have to wait to feel the power of God. If God says, yes, go and do it, that means go and do it, because God's authority and power and His righteousness is already there. By the simple yes. Go ahead and do it. But sometimes in that we wait for the mental, what is that? Rev up. Oh man, I got this. And we wait for that. You know how you drink that pre-workout for the workout, or you drink that caffeine to get the heart pump? We wait for that fresh anointing to jump in, to come in before we actually do something for God. But God in His Word is just as powerful as Him moving in your favor. In verse 14 it says, now therefore fear the Lord, serve Him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. It says with sincerity, meaning with truth, virtue, uprightness, and righteousness. Serve Him with all of these. With all that you have, not all that you have to offer, because I'm telling you this morning, all that you have to offer is the decision of what you're willing to put up. Is I'm willing to offer 20% of my life rather than 100%. I'll offer this much instead of all of it so that I can still do what I want to do. But it's saying that we have to offer all. That means give it all. See, God will build His name however He desires. However He desires, but He has chosen you this morning to bring glory to His name. He has chosen you this morning to bring glory to His name. Well, how is that? I'm not a preacher. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a leader. How did He choose me to bring glory to His name? Well, in the world, when someone told you to be quiet, did you actually be quiet? No. When someone said, shut up, did you actually shut up? No, you got louder, right? If someone says you're getting on their nerves, what'd you tell them? I don't care. Or would you just be like, well, that's your problem, not mine? See, God's already given you a mouth to speak. God's already given you a voice to speak out. God's already given you a character to stand out. See, God will use anybody He chooses to bring glory to His name. You just got out of something bad? Well, God's going to use that as a testimony to glorify His name. He got you out of that so that you could bring glory to His name. That's why when we come to church and we thank God for Him bringing us out of all these things that had us in bondage, that brings glory to Him when we share it at the right appointed time. That's what God anoints. See, God had that very point. Up to this very point, God was doing it all. He was doing it all. But right now, I'm not closing up just yet. But right now, I want everyone to close their eyes real quick. Just close your eyes. Just close your eyes into the respect of what God wants to just show you this morning. Closing your eyes, think about the things that God has done for you. Back in the days when you did not know God, you were lost. You were stuck somewhere. You did not know God. You knew of God. But then God came and He delivered you. God came and He touched your life. And that moment when God touched your life, there was an instant change. There was an overflow of His love, an overflow of peace and joy. There's something that had drastically changed during that time. Not only from that time, but going forward days and weeks and months after that, God began just to speak to you. God began to love on you. God began to move in your circumstances. God was doing something new in your life, and you could not hold back what you were experiencing. It even brought you to tears at certain points. It even brought you to pure gladness at times, thinking, man, Lord, how could I not give my life sooner? How could I have not found you sooner? And all those times when He has brought us out from the things that we thought we were going to get stuck in. And the rebuilding process that was taking place during those times. The restorations in your families and your marriages and your children. The times when you thought you were broken, but God fixed you. The time that God fixed you and He restored you and He brought you back. The times of temptation when they almost overcame you, but God that had the power of those that had the power of God in you were able to overcome those temptations. And now you're here today. And now you're thinking about all the things that God has done. You can open your eyes. Thinking about all those things from the very beginning up to this very point. The things that we were grateful for. The things that we had loved. The things that we fell in love with at the very beginning. The things that we would hold on to. And we said, God, I will never let go. I don't care what I have to do. I will fight for it. I will cry for it. I will hold on with all my life onto this. At those times and those histories that we had with God, and we told God these things and we meant it with all our hearts, remember those things. Because there's plenty of more where that came from. See, God has plenty more of that for our own lives. We may not see it now. We may not be able to feel it now. But I'm telling you this, that God's promises are going to endure. God's promises are going to take place. Look at Abraham. He wasn't able to have kids. But it was in his old age, in his 90s or 70s. I'm talking about old age. That doesn't matter how long they live. But in his old age, remember this, he had his promises fulfilled. In his old age. And I'm telling you this morning, don't wait on God's promises to take place in your life. Abraham did not stop and say, Lord, I'm waiting on you for the promise to take place. But Abraham continued to do whatever the Lord has called him to do. And this morning, this is what I'm encouraging you to do. Is that God promised you something. Don't stop because something is not being able to be seen. Because it seems like the wheel stopped turning. Don't stop because of a promise that we're waiting for that has been waiting for so long. See, there's a lot of work that God has put on your life. And I'm not talking about heavy labor. I'm talking about His labor. And God had put it upon your hearts, and He has given you the ability to do so. Don't get trapped by the things that are not happening, but get into the things that are happening. And the things that are always happening today is what God is doing today. That's what's always happening. That's what's always taking place. Nothing can stop God from moving. I want to be on that train. On that train that always stops, that never stops and it keeps going. That no matter what lies ahead, that this train that I'm on with God, this ride that I'm on with, is just going to go through that barrier. It's going to go through that wall. It's going to go through that bondage. It's going to go through that temptation. It's going to go through that whatever it is that lies ahead of me. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as I'm on this ride with God, God is going to have his way, and I don't have to worry nothing about it. Look at somebody and tell them you don't have to worry about it. Look at somebody and tell them you don't have to worry about it. Yell it at them. You don't have to worry about it. God's got it. Make sure you tell them that God's got it. God's got it. You don't have to worry about it. But God has it. Well, I need a job. You don't have to worry about it. You keep applying, and God's got it. Well, I need finances. Quit trying to look for the easy way and go seek God. God will bring in exactly what you need. God, give me patience when I see those Raider jerseys on that Sunday. I don't want to be blind to it, but Lord, I got to be careful what I pray for with that. Not only that, but 49ers. Whew. I'm not going to say the Dallas Cowboys beat the Raiders, but it's only preseason. I don't like the Cowboys as well either. Hopefully, he don't hear me saying that. Text me later saying, brother, we need to talk. And right here, and it says, I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read it. Verse 14. It says, serve the Lord. In verse 15, in closing, it says, and if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's not like the Israelites had to take a leap of faith. Listen to me this morning. This is good. And this is what reminded me of something for me. The Israelites did not have to take a leap of faith because Joshua was already talking about all the good things that God was doing in the past, even in the present, that they did not even have to do. They were eating off the harvest that they didn't even do. They were living in the land that was given to them. All these things were given to them. It was handed to them. But they had to do what? What was the main thing they had to do? They had to have faith. They had to remain in obedience. They had to stay on course. So when Joshua was telling them this, and he was commanding them to choose, it's not like they had to take a leap of faith because they had history with God. They knew who God was. They knew how God moved in their lives, not only in the Israelites, but even beforehand, in the generation of Moses crossing the Red Sea. And even before that, they experienced God's work, just like we have today. We've experienced God's work. We experienced what God can really, truly do. And it doesn't matter what state of mind we're in today. We experience it whether we like it or not. There was something that we experienced. And so it came to that decision. What stops us from fully committing ourselves to God? What stops us from fully committing ourselves to God?